Hi there, got my mute button all sorted out now. My name is Pauline and I'll be guiding you through a presentation today covering off on the latest employment law changes. And I can see that we've already got several people all online ready to go. So we might just wait a moment before we start deep diving into the content, just in case anyone else was joining us today. Now, there will be recordings available from the session, and sometimes they take a couple of days to come through. So feel free to look out for those. And just to talk you through the screen itself, just in case it's been a while since you've been on a Zoom call, and that might be a good thing now we're not facing lockdowns and things like that at the moment. So you've got your mute button there. At the moment, everybody is automatically on mute and I can't see any video feed. That's all automatic. So if you are dialing in your pajamas at home, then that's absolutely fine. I can't see anything. But if you choose to unmute yourself, if you wanted to ask a question at some point, then just remember the button there. So if I'm blissfully ignoring you, it might be that you're on mute. If I do get any questions, I'd love to answer them. And we got lots of great ones a couple of weeks ago when we ran this same topic. And just in case you don't want to unmute yourself for questions, that's all okay. There are other options. You can see there's a chat box, and that's a great box to use if you have any problems, if you can't hear me, or if the slides are not moving through properly or anything like that. Just let me know and I can take a look at things from there to sort out any little technical gremlins that we might have. And there's also another box that you might see next to your chat box. And this might be at the bottom of your screen along the panel. It could be at the top. Sometimes if you roll your mouse over the screen, it'll actually pop up for you and you can see all of these options on the taskbar. So there's a Q&A box, which you could also use for questions if you've got any about any of the particular points that we go through today. So those are the main bits and pieces, and the information that I run through today will be mainly presented in the context of smaller businesses, because this is part of presenting this information on behalf of Business Station through the Business Solutions Programme, which is it's the masthead for the ASBAS, or Australian Small Business Advisory Services. And of course, these services have been available for some time and open up the opportunity for small organisations to access high quality advisory services for a really low cost. And there's full information on the Business Station website. And with that, there's a whole range of different subject areas, everything from content for social media through to structuring your business and all kinds of things in between. And I'm one of the advisors who often provides guidance around the HR, people and culture space, but also some other elements too. And so this program actually opens up to give people guidance on a one-on-one basis, so that can be unique and tailored to your organisation and what you're facing right now. And also there's some group work that you can actually get through there. So there's some access to group webinars and seminars and things like that, which is really interesting, because sometimes it's nice to hear what other people are doing and what challenges they face. And they might ask interesting different questions that can help provide even more. So I think we've given people enough time just to hop on board now. So without further ado, let's move on with the presentation. So as I do, I always like to do an acknowledgement of country, and I am here in Perth or Boorloo. And so my acknowledgement of country here represents that towards the traditional owners of the land here. And I will do that in the Noongar language to the best of my ability. So, Nala Kadich, Nijabuja, Wajak Noongar Buja, Val Demam, Debam, Kuriye, Border Yirakul. So we know and understand this is Wajak Noongar country of their grandmothers, grandfathers, past, present, and those rising up. Gali Kadich, Nala, Nil Bal, Border Call, Bal Kadajini, Bal Genuini, Nichabuja Kumba. So we know and we listen to the future journey of their knowledge and how they'll continue to look over their many countries and lands. Okay. So as I mentioned, my name is Pauline, and I am about to celebrate a big milestone this year. It will be 10 years of operating my own small business, providing people and culture advisory support to a range of different organisations, from the very big organisations like Western Power and Water Corp and organisations like that, all down to micro businesses that might just have one person working there and might be looking to take on their first employee. So I've actually spent my entire life working in the people and culture space. So over 20 years of my working life has been dedicated here. So lots of experience both here and also in the UK, which you can probably hear from the accent. And so with that, we offer a range of different services, including webinars and seminars like today. Also speaking at conferences, workplace investigations. We do some work in the recruitment space, general advisory, mediation, whole range of different things, and even actually get to play with Lego every now and again as part of our facilitation tools. So we've got quite a nice broad offering in the people space to help organisations and individuals really perform at their very best. So here's the selection of the services that I just mentioned, and we've already gone through those. I'll click on to the next one into the detail of what we're really here for today, and that is all about looking at new workplace laws and how they measure up. So you may have seen on the news quite a bit of discussion, all in the lead up to Christmas, around changes to the workplace laws. Now, most of the discussion actually focused around the multi-enterprise bargaining, which we'll touch upon, but there's also quite a few other elements of discrimination laws and other different changes to existing legislation that came through. But it's actually been the biggest overhaul of workplace employment law and legislation since 2009, when the Fair Work Act came in. And most of the guidance that I go through today actually relates to the Fair Work Act, because most organisations across the nation are actually covered by this Act. The only ones that aren't are organisations that are partnerships in Western Australia, local government, also sole traders. And even if you do fall into one of those categories, then the guidance today is actually, it's generally good practice within organisation. And often the state-based legislation that would otherwise apply has got some very strong correlations to that legislation. So to abide by this as a lawful minimum is a good general standard to look at for all businesses. Now, if you do need to get some state-based information, then have a look at your state-based legislation resource updates. So for the Western Australian businesses out there, this is all through WageLine. So they're the great people who help us out across Western Australia if we've got any long service leave queries, but also if you are local government, sole trader or partnership, they can assist there too. And the other relevant element, I guess, if you are in the partner or the sole trader category, is the fact that you may eventually want to transition your business to a proprietary limited, just to limit your liability. And often it's useful as your business grows to think about operating in that space. Okay, so my big, it's not small print, it's big print here today. Is that this presentation is not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I work a lot in this space, so I've seen and done a lot here and have got a good working knowledge. But the big thing is this is general guidance that's being shared today. It's been very well researched in terms of the changes, but it's not uniquely tailored to your situation and your organisation. So if there is anything that comes up that you might need a little bit more help with, I can give general guidance through the ASBAS program if you book in a session as an advisor, or you can actually reach out to a legal representative, reach out to a law firm for anything that's particularly tricky and complex. Okay, so one of the early things that came through with the first raft of legislation passed at the end of last year was looking at respect at work. And this was mainly around the sexual harassment space. And over the years, there's been a tightening that's been going on a regular basis. Some of it has been in relation to safety law, some of it's been in relation to case law. And this is really looking at considering sexual harassment, not just as it's not very nice in the workplace, but it's actually considered a safety risk. And there's some really good resources on Safe Work Australia that talks around how to make sure your environment is safe from sexual harassment. And one of the big societal changes that's happened over the past few years is that people have decided to speak up about inappropriate behaviours that they've been on the receiving end in the workplace. Some of them, the Harvey Weinsteins of the world and people like that, have had some really quite high profile court cases. But it is actually something that's quite prevalent in organisations. As part of my business doing workplace investigations, we've investigated quite a broad array of different levels of misconduct, and it reflects the statistics that have come out. There's a really interesting report that came out recently saying, although it is mainly male perpetrators towards mainly female people that have been impacted by these behaviours, a quarter of males also report some kind of sexual harassment in the workplace. So any ladies out there that are proudly displaying their fireman calendars right now, I haven't seen this year's, but judging by what I've seen in the past, it might not be such appropriate content for the workplace, because if a lady was to be there just as scantily clad, then it might cause offence in the workplace. So it is important that standards are looked at there, and I have investigated matters where males have actually been the complainant in matters, but most of us have actually reflected the general standards where it's been male towards female behaviours. And these sorts of things do often come out more often in environments where there is a sexually charged or hostile environment. And these can often be where women are in a very male-dominated industry. So there's quite a shocking report out last year around the mining sector and the level of sexual assault that actually occurred in that sector. So mining sector and also other similar sectors have actually got a duty of care to provide that safe work environment. Of course, you don't have control over all of your employees at all times, but there are obligations that you need to follow to make sure you're providing that safe work environment. And then so I'll run through some of those ways that you can actually help protect yourselves and your organisations and your employees through the course of the presentation today. So I've touched on the obscene materials. And so if you've got anything that is blatant pornography, that's definitely a no-no. When I first started out my HR career, it would be not unsurprising to go into the maintenance workshop of a premises and find that there was some nudie calendar up on the wall, or there might be some pornography in someone's bottom drawer. And so those sorts of things are absolutely not acceptable. The problem in workplaces is often poor behaviours are covered up by humour, and people go, oh, I was only joking when I said that, but that is not sufficient. So that sexualised banter in the workplace, the sort of innuendos, that's the sort of behaviour that isn't acceptable in a workplace, and actually starts providing a greying of the acceptable behaviours. And so it's like, oh, it's okay for me to say these things. Oh, I might be able to put my hand on someone's shoulder. I might be able to put my hand somewhere else. It's just unwelcome physical contact could be anywhere. So look, it's good to draw a high bar in terms of your expectations of behaviour in the workplace, and do it as early on as possible within the workplace. As soon as you see something going on, that's your duty to stop it. Because if you walk past any kind of negative behaviour, any kind of unsafe behaviour in the workplace, any bullying, anything like that, you've basically got 9 seconds and you can stop that happening. If you walk past, then people are going, okay, well, that's the way things are around here. We're allowed to get away with this. Nothing was said, so we're just going to carry on. So having that in the back of your mind is something that's quite important. If you think this is happening right now in your workplace, then it's a good time to actually have a session with everybody, a toolbox meeting, saying, this is where we draw a line in the sand. We have noticed that this seems to be happening. We are concerned this is going on. And if we find that this is happening, there will be serious consequences. It could include the loss of employment eventually as well. So as I mentioned with the safety side of things, the safety legislation continues to evolve across the nation. And just at Christmas time, the WA government delivered us the psychosocial safety elements in the new health and safety legislation that came through last year. And so within that, there is a duty for employers where a risk has been identified in the workplace. So that might be there's sexualized banter happening in the workplace. Where that's been identified, you must take some form of action. And so that action must be reasonable and proportionate in terms of what is actually happening to prevent that from occurring. And again, Safe Work Australia has got some brilliant ideas on what you could do to look into these sorts of anomalies. So the Respect at Work framework talks around a number of different ways to support compliance in your organisation and minimise that risk of their issues occurring. So with that, having some strong policies and procedures is a good way to go. And with that, it's not just about having them, but it's also about making sure people are aware on them. You might actually ask people to sign off on them and keep that record of the sign off on people's files so that you can say, I did everything possible to make sure that person didn't misbehave and they went ahead and did it anyway. I made sure that person had a copy of the policy and they signed off to say that they'd understood it. And then you could say, I also monitored my workforce. So you could do something as simple as a discussion in a meeting, touching on inappropriate behaviours, perhaps as a topic in a one-on-one conversation with your workers. You could send out a quick survey monkey. Have you been subject to any inappropriate conduct in the workplace? If so, can you tell us what it was? Was it bullying, harassment, sexual harassment? And then you can get a picture of the sorts of behaviours and also define what those are. If you are concerned there is something happening or if someone's put in a complaint, then putting in appropriate support is important. So if someone's complained, keeping them updated on the status of their complaint and the outcome of any investigations is a good thing to do. And delivering training on a regular basis is important. So that training, if you're in a micro business, could be as simple as, okay, we're having a toolbox today. We're going to take 15 minutes to have a review through the policy around sexual harassment in the workplace. And that could be your training session, or you could buy an e-learning module. There's all sorts of different ways. Bring in an external facilitator. And with all of these different elements of legislation that are coming through at the moment, one of the things that I'm being asked to do a lot is actually go out and help provide education to workplaces, to employees, in terms of what the expected standards of behaviour are. Now, another way you can actually protect yourselves is by taking other reasonable steps in the workplace. That could be including a poster. So this QR code that's up on the screen now, you might like to scan it. There's an organisation in Perth called EEO Specialists, and Franca there has kindly made some free resources available. So the case law to date shows that there's 10 different things that you need to be doing in a workplace. So that if somebody misbehaves, they sexually harass somebody, you've done these 10 things, you have done everything within your power as an employer to make sure that didn't happen. And so you might not have a claim against you. The perpetrator of that might be subject to some financial penalties, but you as an employer would not. So one of the things is having that regular training and education, having your up-to-date policies, making sure you take action, you've got a clear complaints process, and having these posters in the workplace. You can show that you've had your education. And also a little bit of a reminder about appropriate behaviour if there's going to be a Christmas party or a big function with clients where there might be alcohol involved or anything else, any other potential for things to go awry. It's good to get in before that event takes place. As I mentioned, if you've got any questions, feel free to fire away. It's great to see that we've actually got some up there. Thank you so much for letting me know about the PowerPoint slides not updating. I actually had this problem last time. So what I'll do is I'll just do a little workaround in the switch over to taking it out of presentation mode. So we'll get onto that there. So thank you for those comments there. And I will do that without further ado. I'm going to stop the slideshow for a moment, and then exit the presentation briefly, and then we can pop back into. Okay, and so while you give me just a moment of your time just to get all of that done, then feel free to have a think about any questions that you may have so far, and pop them up into the chat box, and we'll go from there. All right, so I'm just going to get the screen all sorted now. Reshare it. Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen there all in full. I'll just make that a little bigger, and so hopefully it's even easier to see the full slide. There we go. So that QR code brings you up with a range of different posters on a range of different topics around potential areas of discrimination in the workplace or other inappropriate behaviours in the workplace. And the great thing about this is you can actually just print out all of the ones that are up there, and then every month, wherever your shared spaces, if you've got a shared tea room, or even internally, you may have workers that work remotely, and then from there, you could put this in your shared drive. All right then, so taking a look onto our next element within the changes. So let's get the next slide moving in just a moment. Just see if I can share the presentation up there. Hopefully this will restart everything, and then I can keep going on. Okay, so hopefully you can see up there we've got the next slide about to come up. The joys of working with a Mac means that there's often a moment of hesitation before everything all pops up on my screen, but I've got it on now. So hopefully you can see a slide titled the Fair Work Act coverage. And I've touched on some of this already at the beginning of the presentation, talking about that difference between those sole traders partnerships and other non-trading corporations there. So we can progress on to the Secure Work, Better Jobs Act. This was the one that was passed on the last sitting day before Christmas, as they all worked very hard over there in Parliament House to look at this. And as I mentioned, the multi-employer bargaining was a big part of this that got the headlines. There was a lot of agitation within the small business community. There were some amendments and tweaks that came to the final form. And so what the legislation basically outlines is that employers may be compelled to bargain with other organisations to negotiate terms and conditions with their workforce. So large organisations, the likes of, let's say, Rio Tinto and big companies like that, they have an enterprise agreement negotiating process. They'll have representatives that will come in from the workforce saying, we want all of these things. We want a 5% pay rise every year. We also want to have a longer lunch break, and we want this allowance or whatever. The employers will come in and say, we want the productivity improvement. We want to take this away because we want to have this here. And there's this big bargaining process that goes on and can actually take months. Now, this is something that is unlikely to impact on many small businesses. There are some industries that are likely to be impacted more than others. So, for example, it's been noted that perhaps aged care, childcare, those sorts of lower waged occupations, even some elements of retail perhaps, then there may be enterprise bargaining happens there. So often this is where a union or perhaps employees get together and group employers. So it might be by a geographical region. So it could be all aged care facilities in Albany in Western Australia, for example. Or it could be around another element. So all people covered by this particular award or in this particular nature of enterprise. Now, the smaller organisations, the micro organisations that tend to attend these webinars are unlikely to be targeted by this, just because it's mostly going to be driven by the unions trying to up the wages after such terribly poor wage growth over the past decade or more, where the cost of living crisis is actually really starting to bite for a lot of people. We've got the whole class of the working poor across the nation there, whereas there's some very well-off people that are at the top tier of some of the big companies out there. And we're starting to have quite an uneven society, so the Labour government decided that's something that they want to tackle, and this is a way that can happen. And so the larger employers that have got a few hundred employees are more likely to get swept up into this, because it's easier to get some big results from there. And the unions are quite resource poor, and the employers there have got quite large workloads, so should be okay on that front, but it's good to be mindful of that. And if you do ever have any requests to participate or orders to participate in multi-employer bargaining, that's where it's good to get a little bit of external advice, unless you've got prior experience in that space. A big interesting one is fixed term contracts. And so within organisations, this is something that's been used quite a bit. I've used it in my business, where sometimes, with COVID, with global financial crisis, with an impending recession in many nations overseas, all sorts of things are going on. It's really hard to say whether or not you can provide employment for the long term for your staff. And maybe you can provide some kind of employment, but you might need different roles with the evolving nature of technology and tools, all sorts of things. There's a new tool out there, it's called GPT Chat. And so this is something where you can actually ask this chatbot to write all your marketing content, and it's coming out with some really amazing stuff nowadays. So you might have an employee who does that in your team right now, and they might need to either change or into a different role within your organisation, or their role might no longer exist in a very short period of time. So short-term contracts or fixed-term contracts have actually been quite useful, where that ongoing commitment might have been difficult. Tends to be used for senior roles in organisation. So anyone who's getting paid more than about 160,000, these sorts of rules don't apply to them. Anyone who, perhaps if you've been awarded a government contract for a period of time, then it's okay for your contracts to align with that. But for most other roles within organisations, there is a limit on 2 years. So you can't actually have a fixed term contract for more than that. And that could be that you offer a 1-year contract with a 1-year extension, but you can't actually take it on from there. Now, an interesting one that has potential to cause some concern in your organisation. And this is one reason to be cheerful about the legislation. The press were so focused on the impact of multi-employer bargaining that pay secrecy didn't really get that much. So I haven't actually heard of many people talking around pay secrecy in organisations right now. So from when the legislation came into effect just before Christmas, you're unable to prevent your employees to talking to each other about their pay. Now, all employees now have a right to ask their peers and anyone else in the organisation what they're getting paid. But when they're, let's say you were asking me how much I got paid, I don't have to reveal that information. But if I choose to, then there may be consequences that you need to consider there. So this is a great point in time, while it isn't that well known that this is able to happen in organisations and workplaces across the nation. This is a great time to get your house in order. So if you went and said, oh, I wasn't sure what to pay this person, so I just matched what they're in their last job, and you did that the same with somebody else, and they're both in the same role, but they're actually getting paid maybe $10,000 difference, now's the time to sort it out. Maybe bump up the pay of the lower paid person, or tell the higher paid person you're not having any more pay rises until everybody else's rates all fall into line. So that's a very blunt way of explaining it. Those are some options there, and there's a bit more nuance that you might need to work through to do that tactfully within your workforce. But it is really important just to think about perhaps explaining to your workforce, if you hear that lots of people are having these sorts of discussions, where they are talking about pay rates, then talking proactively around the fact that we pay off this award. We actually follow the definitions in the award to decide your pay rate, or we carry out a market review for each role. So we make sure that we're paying in alignment with the market rates for this position, or whatever your logic is, rather than just, oh, well, this is how much money we had in the budget, and we had more at this time, so we gave somebody a bit more. So if you can't justify it, then have a think about how you can rectify it. Discrimination is another area, and hopefully these slides are flicking through okay. If not, then I'm talking through everything that's on there and more, so it's not the end of the world, but it is nice to have it up on the screen. So anti-discrimination laws across the nation are a little different. There's some Commonwealth laws that protect everybody, and then there's also some state-based differences. And so some of the new anti-discrimination laws that come in help to eliminate those differences. There was already states where there was protection on these areas, and so this is just about making sure that that's national, which is great because it makes it easier to do business in a lawful way when you've got a company that might have perhaps subsidiaries or parts of your organisations in other states. Maybe one day we can, across the nation, have one set of laws and not have the state-based legislation. I've been hoping that for the entire time I've lived here. Much as it's great for consultants to earn money off advice in the complex world of employment law in this country, it has an impact on productivity. I think that the Fair Work legislation that came in 2009 was a big step towards nationalising the rules, and the harmonisation of the safety legislation that's gone place is another step forward, and slowly we are getting to that point where we can have the same rules for all. So the anti-discrimination laws now cover breastfeeding, gender identity and intersex status. So you cannot discriminate against people on any of those grounds. There are times where there are legitimate elements of discrimination. So if you have somebody who has, let's say there is a disability, and so let's say I've got a friend and he is unable to climb ladders due to he's got issues with his legs as a result of a genetic condition. And so if, for example, when I was recruiting somebody for a marine pilot role, so the people who drive boats into harbour, they've got to actually come up in a little boat, they've got to get up this ladder up the side of these massive container ships in order to guide the boat in. So he would not have been able to perform the inherent requirements of that role. So it's okay to say to this guy, go, look, really sorry, but you're unable to pass the inherent requirements of the role test, so unable to do that. Also acting, so if you have an arts company and certain actors, then that's where you might have certain defined roles for certain reasons. Although even in that space, there's a bit more fluidity than there used to be. Now, those three new areas that are covered by discrimination legislation build upon the elements that have been there for many years. So the Commonwealth laws already in place cover things like race, colour, gender, sexual orientation, age, physical or mental disability, any kind of marital status, family or career, carers' responsibilities, pregnancy, religion, political opinion, and also any national extraction or social origin. So quite a bit is covered there. So if you're recruiting for somebody, you can't go, you're too old for the job, you'll never pick up this computer system, and discount somebody on that. It's okay to go on people's actual competency level. So perhaps as part of your selection process, you get people to do a little practice exercise, and this person could type out 80 words per minute and also do all the formatting in a document in the 20 minutes allowed. Whereas somebody else couldn't do it, then you could say, okay, well, there's your test, if that's something that's relevant to the job role. Okay, so the next element that changed, this is the final major change that came through in the new legislation. This actually takes effect soon, so that's May 2023 that this comes through, and this is around flexible work. So people who have young children have already got the right to apply for flexible work, and you have a duty as an employer to consider it, but you don't necessarily have to grant it. But the legislation is extending out to people who are in a family and domestic violence situation, which could include kinship in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander relationships. It could be a member of somebody's household or intimate domestic partner. Could be a whole range of different setups there. So people actually have the right to apply. And now there's an obligation on employers to give detailed reasons for refusal. So you can say no, but you have to have a strong case. And if the employee isn't happy with that outcome, they can go to Fair Work, and Fair Work will actually decide. So it's good to try and work with people and negotiate with people. And if they say, oh, I know I was working full time, but I really want to come back to part time, and you're kind of, oh, I don't know how I can make this role work part time, you might be able to say, okay, well, maybe you could do reduced hours every day. You still do 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, but you might only do 5 hours a day instead of 7.6, for example, so that somebody could fit in around, let's say, school hours or other caring responsibilities and things like that. So having really good quality conversations is the key to this, and basically most other employment disputes and issues in the workplace. Often, at the end of the day, the first stage of any process that you go through with Fair Work Australia is conciliation, where it's all about negotiating and bringing parties together to think about other solutions to a problem. And so if you can do it before it gets to Fair Work, we've saved yourself a ton of time and complexity. There have been some other recent changes, and although this didn't come through in that just before Christmas legislation change, I thought it's good to highlight it because some of these elements have actually got a little bit hidden because there's been so much other stuff going on. So just to make sure that everyone's across the new family and domestic violence leave, if you are under the Fair Work Act, then you have to give all employees, when they commence employment, a copy of the National Employment Standards, and there are 2 copies. There's one for casuals, one for full-timers. And at the moment, people who are in situations involving family and domestic violence leave can get up to 5 days unpaid. That is now changing. All employees, whether they be full-time, part-time or casual, there's no prorating, they can access 10 days of family and domestic violence leave each year. And that starts from 1st of August for all small businesses, which is less than 15 employees. If you've got more than 15, then that actually applies from the 1st of February. So you've just got a few days to get your house in order there. There's still a lot of shame and stigma attached to family and domestic violence leave situations. So not many employers ever get applications for leave of this nature. But it's good to be aware of it. So if it does come up, then you're doing the right thing. Casual employees. So legislation's been around now for coming up for a couple of years around the right to request ongoing employment. And the screenshot you can see up there is from the Casual Employment Information Fair Work Information Statement. This is something that you need to give to all casual employees when they start work. And it's a great thing to have pinned on the company notice board, as is your normal Fair Work Information Statement, or a virtual notice board if you haven't got a pin board in your office or workstation, work environment. Now, with this, it's important to note that employees, after they've been with your organisation, they've got a right to request ongoing employment as a full-time or part-time after 12 months. You have a duty to consider that and then inform them what the outcome is. You might go, yep, okay, I wasn't sure what demand was going to be. We live in such a crazy world, whereas now I think I know what the hours can be. I can commit to 24 hours a week, for example, and then you draw up the contract in line with that. Or you may get an employee and you're going, look, I'd really like to take you on as a part-time employee for 24 hours a week. And they're going, I'd love to do that, but I really like getting paid more. My mortgage has gone up quite a bit over the past few months and I just can't afford to go part-time. that's where it's good to write them a little letter saying, congratulations, we've now reached 12 months service. I would like to offer you this position. If you would prefer to remain a casual employee, please sign below, words to that effect. Because then if that person later on says, well, you never gave me the opportunity to have an ongoing role in your organization, you can go, I did, and here's the letter, here's a copy of it. You signed off to say you wanted to be a casual employee. And so with that, you had less rights. You didn't have a right to any redundancy pay or unfair dismissal or longer notice periods or access to paid forms of leave, such as personal leave or the annual leave as well. So it's good to get your house in order on those elements. Oh, another interesting area is contractors versus employees. And this is something that kind of seems to sort of sway a little bit with the tide. There's been different cases that have happened over the years. And it can be a little bit tricky to figure out whether your person's a contractor or an employee. And sometimes the label you put on the relationship isn't enough. There's a famous case several years ago with Fair Work. Gosh, it's going back more than 10 years ago now, where there was somebody that the employer was trying to say, you are a contractor, and but they were treating this person entirely like an employee. They had to apply for leave, they had to turn up on a roster, all these sorts of things. And the commissioner says, if you've got something that presents as a duck, it quacks like a duck, it moves like a duck, it's got feet like a duck, you can't just call it a chicken just because it's convenient. So Fair Work do a judge of, okay, what does this situation look like, rather than what title you're trying to put on there. Now, up on the screen, you will hopefully, as long as my slides are progressing well, be able to see there's another QR code. This takes you straight through to Fair Work. There's some brilliant guidance up there on how you decide whether somebody is a contractor or employee. Some of it is down to the control that somebody has over the work that's undertaken. So, for example, if you engage my services, you don't get to tell me whether I do writing up the report for you at midnight on a Sunday because I've left things a bit last minute for my deadline, or if I'm doing it at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning. It's I control that element there. So with that, then there's also the risk is an element. So employees don't carry the risk, and contractors do. So I need to get my own insurance when people engage my services, whereas an employee wouldn't need to. I need to provide my own tools and equipment when I'm working for my clients, whereas employees have it provided. I have the ability to delegate this to members of my team. I've got a small team of employees and subcontractors, and I can delegate out that work, whereas an employee cannot delegate that out. As I mentioned, I pick my hours of work. Thankfully, they're not usually midnight on a Sunday. I'm more organised than that. But hours of work can be chosen for an employee. So you must turn up at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning or at 6 o'clock on a Monday morning at our warehouse and be dressed and ready for work. Employees have an expectation of work continuing, whereas contractors do not. And you can see all the full definitions of that all on that Fair Work page there. Okay, so taking a look onto the next slide here, we've got the ATO. And this is where things are a little bit interesting. So with the ATO, they have similar, so you notice there's some very similar keywords. It's good to scan that QR code again to get the full information. So control, but also integration is something that's looked at there, and the mode of remuneration. So with Fair Work, they don't care whether you're asking someone to provide an invoice or if you're paying them through the payroll. They make judgments on different criteria, whereas the ATO, that is something that influences, as well as that whole risk delegation and provision of tools and equipment. And it may be, for example, if you've engaged somebody as a subcontractor who is a sole trader. So if people engage me, I'm a proprietary limited company. They're not engaging a person, they're engaging a company. Because if you're engaging that sole trader, and they're doing a lot of hours, they're virtually working for you all the time, you're their only client, and then you may actually end up having to pay superannuation on them. So it's good to take a look at this just in case, and encourage any contractors you do have to either come on board as an employee if you've got that need ongoing, or considering taking up some very clear relationships elsewhere. But having a really strong contract that underpins all of this is important too, so that you can show the intent at the start of the relationship was that you were going to be expecting, if you're engaging a contractor, that they provide you invoices, that they need to have appropriate risk mitigation, so your insurance is in place, and that the term of the agreement doesn't commit to any kind of level of work, and so on and so forth. So that's something to think about then. Other considerations, depending on your state and territory, can be around work cover or your workers' compensation insurance. So even though these people might not be employees, they may still be deemed workers if they're undertaking things. So, for example, one of my clients ran a podiatry practice, and they were engaging a subcontractor as a podiatrist. That person was bringing their tools, equipment, and they were ticking all these other boxes. They had other clients and so on and so forth. So they didn't meet the ATO test or the Fair Work test, but they did actually need to get covered by workers' compensation because they were directly working with the clients of this podiatry practice. And payroll tax. Again, have a look at the information for Treasury or Department of Finance in your particular state or territory, and they'll tell you whether or not you should be paying payroll tax on your contractors. Okay, so taking a little bit of a look at awards. Now, wage theft legislation has been talked about for some time. This is a good time to get your house in order. Maybe have a think about your payroll audit. Make sure that people are getting everything they should, particularly if they're an annualized arrangement. Reverse engineer that, make sure people are getting all of their penalties and their allowances and everything else that they're lawfully entitled to, so you don't end up like poor old George here. So the Bell Tower Times is quite a well-known social commentator in Perth that can have some interesting, sarcastic almost comments. So people George was trying to get some sympathy for the fact that, I never meant for this to go wrong, but Fair Work and other compliance bodies are not very sympathetic, really. And so he was trying to go, oh, poor me, I was trying to do my best. Whereas he's actually running a multi-million-dollar operation. He should have actually had the right kind of systems in place to manage the payroll. He had basically underpaid his employees by millions of dollars, and much as he was trying to get all the sympathy from the public, I hate it when I get busted for systemic wage theft and suffer the consequences of my own actions. So, your reputation out there as an organisation really can be impacted quite greatly just by somebody not running the payroll properly. Now, a way to make sure that you are paying people properly is to take a look at your organisation and see if there is modern award coverage. Some roles might be above award if you've got some senior members of your team. It's really important that you have a look at your industry and see if there is an industrial award. And then if there isn't an industrial award, have a look at your occupational award and see what might be in there. So your business, I've got a small business client that's got less than 20 employees and they're on 3 different awards. So it can be possible. They're on the Food Manufacturing Award, they're on the Clerical Award and the Professional Employees Award. So it's just good to be mindful of those different elements and not just go, I've picked my award for my business and that's it. There may be other elements in there. And then that helps you to fully understand what the lawful minimums are for people that are working in your organisation. And with that, you've got all those principles in the award in terms of how much overtime should be paid at, Saturday rates, Sunday rates, public holiday rates, first aid allowances, hot work allowances, travel, because travel might be different on the award, the kilometre claim rate. For example, the Social Community Home Care Disability Services Award is higher than that's shown by the ATO as being the standard travel rate there. So it really is good to have a look into the nitty-gritty of these areas. And that's something that actually helped quite a few people with. National employment standards are important from a compliance perspective as well, meeting at least the national minimum wage if your employees don't have an applicable award, and then anything that's in your policy or contract. So you can't just go, business isn't going so well right now, and I know I said I was going to pay you $30 an hour, I'm actually going to pay you $22. because that's national minimum wage at the moment. So you can't make unilateral changes to a contract, but you could actually have a chat to your staff if you are in a difficult situation. Say, hey, look, things have not been as good as I'd hoped for this quarter. Can we please have a chat about things? It's really important. I really value your contribution. I'd like to pay on the award rather than the rate that we've got, and then review this in 3 months' time. Hopefully I can increase it back to where we're at, and maybe even pay a back pay if I'm in a good position then. So you could negotiate that, or you could negotiate a cut of hours, but you can't just tell people that's the change and that's it. They've just got to suck it up. I have had people contact me before now that have tried that, and it's not a good way to go. It's a way to head towards hot water, unfortunately. And talking of hot water, the sorts of penalties that organisations can be facing if they don't do the right thing in their organisations is there could be discrimination claims, and for that, that could be through a federal or state process, and the penalties can be unlimited for that. So there are cases where things have gone into thousands, up over $1 million. So it's good to make sure that you've got your house in order around that. Adverse actions, that's when someone exercises a workplace right. So let's say somebody wanted to take family and domestic violence leave, and you're kind of going, oh, well, they've already taken all their sick leave this year. I'm just going to sack them because they're clearly not, they've got too much going on, they've got too many issues. Then that's not an appropriate way to go. They're exercising their workplace right to family and domestic violence leave, and so they can take you to Fair Work. The onus is on you to prove that that dismissal wasn't as a result of that person exercising the workplace right, and it is quite difficult for employers to prove that. And so with that, you could be looking at 66,000 as a penalty payout on there. Unfair dismissals are another element to look at, and sometimes you might get combined claims where people might be claiming across all sorts of different elements, not just the one single area. But with unfair dismissal, you're looking at a claim for wages for the period of unemployment and any compensation relating to direct losses. So, for example, with that, you could say, okay, well, there's the wages for the period unemployed. There's also 3 public holidays. That person would have ordinarily been mustered to work because it was over the Christmas break. So that's got to be in there, along with superannuation entitlement, so on and so forth. And in unfair dismissal, Fair Work can mandate that you have to take that person back on. They can mandate reinstatement. Even if you've replaced that person with somebody else, you have to take that person back on. So it's good to do things properly. And sometimes a quick phone call to get your house in order at the start of any process thinking about termination can really help you avoid a lot of issues down the line. Of course, the issues aren't just in the payout cost, it's also that opportunity loss. So rather than looking at the successful day-to-day operation and long-term operation of your business, you've got this huge thing that's going to chew through a lot of time, creates a lot of stress, can ramp up a lot in legal costs just by not doing things right in the first place. So it's good to keep up to date, and it's great that you've actually taken the time today to attend this presentation so that you can be up to date on the latest changes that have come through with the legislation. And so to stay up to date, it's great to register for Fair Work updates if you're part of Fair Work jurisdiction. If you're part of another employment law jurisdiction in your state or territory, then it's good to sign up for them. So, for example, West Australia, Wageline do different sessions from time to time. Also, attend any sessions like this one today, where you can actually get some updates on what's happening. And so you can also request sessions. So I had a couple of people that were actually saying that they'd like to have a session on this topic that had approached me. So that's why Business Station have actually set this up. Business Station isn't the only place. Also, law firms often do free presentations. You might even get free breakfast out of it. So see if you can get yourself invited along to some of those, and they'll also give you the opportunity to often ask a few questions at the end. And quite a few law firms are doing those remotely. So if you are a regional employer and you can't get into your local metropolitan centre, then you might be able to attend online. The ATO have also got some really good workshops. They actually do, much as it can seem like you might feel like sometimes they're trying to work against you, they actually do offer some really good webinars and compliance tools and topics there. They used to offer this really cool tool that you could actually go through, and is this person an employee or contractor? That unfortunately with some legislation that's come through, they're still trying to tweak that, and it's not available, but hopefully it'll be back again soon to make that decision-making process a bit easier. And for individual guidance, you can always book a session, of course, with an advisor. So, wow, there we go. We've run through the topic today, and in lots of detail. Hopefully it's enough for you. And if you do have any questions, now is the time to ask. So that might be general things, or if you've got anything specifically relating to an issue in your workplace, and even if it's not related to the topic we've gone through and all the content we've looked at today, that's all okay. So I'll give you a moment. You can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask that question verbally, or feel free to pop it up in the chat box or the Q&A box from there. And we had some really interesting questions last time around. Just looking at a couple of different nuances around contractors and employees, and what might happen if somebody who you thought was a contractor ends up being found to be an employee. Well, there's some cases actually that are still even rumbling through the court processes around that at the moment that are helping to define it further. But with that, if somebody's found to be an employee, then that means that they've got coverage for things like unfair dismissal protection. You may be in a position where you need to instate some backdated leave for people, so they might be entitled to significant amounts of annual leave, non-service leave. So there's lots of different elements that can come through from there. Okay. So just taking a look up at the chat box, and we haven't got any questions. So hopefully that means that the session today has answered all of the ones that you may have had in your mind at the start. And so I'll be wrapping things up from here. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining me for our session on this very important topic. And hopefully the information that has been presented will really help you and your organisation in terms of compliance, but also helping you have a much better night's sleep as well going forward. So thank you so much. Take care. Goodbye.